Greetings guys, back at the movies once again, and tonight we've been invited to the brand new film directed by Todd Field, and that is Tar, thanks to Universal Pictures for the invitation. The film stars a fellow Australian, Cate Blanchett, and also Nina Hoss. Cate Blanchett is actually in attendance tonight, and she's going to be presenting the film and also giving a bit of insight with a Q&A. We're just about to head in and check this film out. Hopefully you enjoy the footage in the meantime, and I'll be back after this to let you know my thoughts on the film and the production, and to give you a bit of a review of the movie. Talk to you soon.
Who better to do a quick introduction than the maestro herself? Please welcome Cate Blanchett.
I don't really want to say too much. I never personally, as an audience member, want to know anything about a film that I go in before I go in and see it. And I personally haven't processed the experience of making this film, and I couldn't possibly tell you what it's about, nor would I want to. It feels very strange to be here without Todd Field. It's been 16 years since he made a movie, and I feel so blessed to have worked alongside him and his extraordinary actors. And the Dresden Philharmonie, which was a life-changing experience to stand up on the podium in front of them, and all of the music is diegetic. You know, it's all the sounds you hear are sounds that we all made together. So that was an incredible privilege. But I think I want to say one thing. It's a film that has a conductor at its centre, but it's not about the classical music world. You don't need to know any terminology at all. Just allow that to wash over you. Don't try and make sense of it. And I didn't. I still can't. But something that Todd said to me, which I still think about, the experience. It's a meditation on power, I think, in a lot of ways. And he said that no one's innocent, no one's entirely guilty, and that absolutes are nonsense unless it is a sporting event. So, striker. So it's very difficult to find spaces where you can have nuanced discussions about the big questions that we need to ask ourselves as a species. And the film, without wanting to be too grand, asks a few of them. And I want to say thank you so much to the Sydney Film Festival for hosting this screening. Festivals are so important. And it's so great to be back in the cinema, where the ideas are big and we're all sitting together in the dark. So thanks for very much.
If you're here, then you already know who she is. Lydia Tarr is many things. As a conductor, Tarr began her career with the Cleveland Orchestra, Chicago Symphony Orchestra, the Boston Symphony Orchestra, until she had last arrived here at our own New York Philharmonic. In 2013, Berlin elected Tarr as its principal conductor, and she's remained there ever since. Lydia Tarr has also written music for the stage and screen. She is one of only 15 EGOTs, meaning those who have won all 4 major entertainment awards. Thank you for joining us, Maestro.
Thank you.
How's the writing going?
Not so well. I keep hearing something.
Schopenhauer measured a man's intelligence against his sensitivity to noise.
Do you ever find yourself overwhelmed by emotion?
Yes. Yes, that does happen.
We have a problem.
I received another weird email.
There's no reason to get caught up in any intrigue.
I'm worried. She's starting to disappear into herself.
You want to dance the mask, you must service the composer. You gotta supplement yourself. Your ego and, yes, your identity.
You must in fact stand in front of the public and God and obliterate yourself.
She scares me.
Oh, I love you, City.
What a film. Kate, Todd Field has said that, he'd envisaged this film, he'd written the film, but he had written it with you in mind completely, and he wasn't going to make it unless you said yes. So I'm sure that was like a no pressure situation, but tell us about your relationship with Todd, because had you worked with him before?
No, we'd met about 10 years ago. He was working on a script with Joan Didion, and we got on incredibly well. He's an incredibly intelligent, well-read individual. He's also a jazz musician, a cinematographer, a screenwriter, a director, a farmer. I don't know, there's nothing he doesn't. He has fingers in so many pies. He also restores old houses. And so there was a lot to talk about and unpack. And so I knew that I'd love to be in dialogue, in a creative dialogue with him in some way. But we didn't keep in touch, and then this really came out of the blue. And so I'd sort of already said yes before I read it, but then I hadn't,
Yeah. But there's no greater team sport in filmmaking in a lot of ways, but this film is obviously a particular collaboration between Todd as writer-director and you as sort of lead actor.
Yeah.
What was that relationship like while you were making the film?
Well, I'd had the experience once or twice in the theatre with directors who I'd worked with repeatedly, and you find you have a shorthand, and it's almost like silent movie acting, as you can see them squirming in the seat and you know exactly what they mean. They haven't, I guess that's what conducting is that they, conductors make a gesture, but and you know exactly what they want you to do, what texture, what flavour, what colour you want, they're wanting you to express with your instrument. But I hadn't, and I've been very fortunate to work with some extraordinary directors in my career who I'd love to work with a second time. But to have that immediate sort of simpatico with someone, it's incredibly rare. And I sort of had that with Todd. Often when someone has written a screenplay, you feel like the thing is, and they direct it, you feel like it's somehow hermetically sealed. But Todd was totally willing to throw it away. For example, in that first moment where Tara is backstage, he had written, she suffers from this. That's what I love about the script. It doesn't point to, the film doesn't point to any of these things specifically, but the character suffers from misophonia, which I didn't know what it was. It's a recently diagnosed disorder. It's not a very good word, but where you have an acute sensitivity to sound. And so it was written that she's standing backstage and she's hearing chip packets, bottles being opened, and she's trying to calm her mind so that she can think properly. And then when we came to do it on the day, I said, so are we doing cutaways of the things in, no. Oh, I just wrote that as a placeholder. We're not, no, you just do what you do. And so, but what was great about that was I knew as an actor what the writer had intended, but I also knew that the filmmaker wanted something else. So he was very fluid in the way he worked, actually. So it was really liberating and really exciting. It was almost like working in a rehearsal room where you felt like there wasn't a sense of preciousness, because oftentimes you obviously with limited time, limited resources, and there was a lot to capture and unpack in the film. You can get a bit precious and think, well, we've only got, we have to get this right, but it was never that. He was always willing to explore.
Well, speaking of incredible talent, you're also working with an incredible fellow actor in
Nina Hoss.
Oh my God!
You have to say Nina. Oh my God, Hoss. Yeah.
Well, so you had Nina, you had Naomi, and then you had this incredible new, totally undiscovered talent in Sophie, who plays Olga, who'd never actually acted before. What was the dynamic like because there's such a fascinating relationship between Lydia and each of those, their three characters. What was it like working with the three of those three actors?
Well, they're very different relationships. That's what I love about the film, is that One sense of self is we're different people with the different people that we have. We have different relationships with people, and so it expresses different sides of a personality, and those relationships are very, very different. Those actors are very different. They have very, very different processes, and I was in awe of Todd being able to hold all those different processes together and bring them all on board into the same story. Sophie was fantastic. She was so curious about the process of acting. She'd never been on a film set. She'd never acted at all, ever, and she only auditioned because a friend of hers wanted the gig. So you can imagine how that friendship went down. Yeah. But she, it was so great to work with a musician who was having to act, and then me having to act a musician. So there was a lot of, we were all outside our comfort zone. We were all curious, but somehow we were all in the same boat, even though it was all we came from very different places.
Speaking of learning those new things, though, for this film you had to learn how to conduct, play the piano, speak German, and I thought you had to learn how to be a stunt driver, but you tell me that actually that's you are a stunt driver.
That's the one thing I can do.
But I'm curious.
I'm a very good driver. I don't sound very good at many things, but I am a very good driver.
Excellent.
Although my daughter does sit in the back seat going. I think.
Well, having watched that scene, I'm not surprised. But when you learn new skills for a particular character, when you let go of the character, what do you retain of those skills? Is it all still there at the back of the mind somewhere?
It was tragically forgotten. Well, there were many things that I've always thought to myself, strangely, that if I had a Babel fish in my ear, that of course I'd be fluent in German. And I said that to Thomas Ostermeyer, who runs the Schaubühne Theatre, and he just looked at me like I was crazy. I've always loved the German language, and I learned it at school a little bit. But these are all things that were. It's like they're just the things I had to do to get to the stuff of playing the role, and I was so daunted by it, to be perfectly frank. I was grateful for these hurdles that I had to surmount, because it meant that all the kind of what could have become sort of stultifying anxiety was kind of channeled into the doing, the making, the preparing. And I said to Todd, I said, I'm really slow. Can I just walk past camera for a couple of days? A couple of long shots, me learning to walk as the character. And he said, yeah, absolutely. And then whenever he had bad news, he always said, here's the thing. and so he came up to me like a week before we started shooting, and said, here's the thing. We're going to lose the Dresden Philharmonic. Because COVID cases are rising, and they're only available to shoot with us in the first week, so we have to do all the music first. And I went, no! But in the end, it was the best. It was a gift, because we had to do it, and I realised what the character had to lose, because it is magnificent. Standing in the centre of that sound when that sound comes back at you. And look, it's not a film about conducting. It's, as you see, it's a process movie. It's about people in the process of becoming or transitioning, moving through to another stage. It's very much about. It's not about the arrival. Not that we ever arrive anywhere. So it was in fragments, but still, I was really grateful to know the stakes of the character and build that connection with the orchestra.
Well, speaking about what the film is about...
Please tell me.
Yeah, well, I think... Okay.
We'll hand the mic around. We've got a few hours.
It's about power and power relationships. But quite often where we see that sort of power relationship is usually a man exercising that power, and the arrogance of that power, and the sort of disregard or lack of introspection about the impact of how that power is exercised. What do you think audiences what insights might they get differently about some of those issues, given that Lydia is a female character as opposed to what we normally see as a male.
Yes. I mean, oh, okay. Is this from the QR code?
Yes.
Okay. Are they personal? Of course, one thinks about power, but you think about who benefits, who holds up. Because the thing is, one of my favourite movies of all time, and I'm sure I'm not alone here, is The Wizard of Oz. There's usually a little white guy behind a curtain. Power is not as unassailable and intractable and as solid as we think it is. And that we all subscribe to holding these things up. And that's what, I did find it. It's really, I don't know what the answers are. But I kept thinking about Lydia as someone who has, through the process of, she wanted all her life to be part of the big, grand narratives of classical music. Because when you go to the cinema, you think bigger thoughts than when you're at home on your couch. The stakes are lower. And when you play those big works, whether they're they're written by straight Austro-Hungarian church-going white guys, but they're big. And she's always wanted to have the right to be in dialogue with them. But the problem is she's doing it at a time when all of that stuff is being called into question. So she's sort of the right person at the wrong time. She's so out of sync with herself. And by subscribing, I think she's probably, I kept thinking, she went up the ukulele valley for 5 years with the Shipibo Kanibo people. And so what I did is during sorry, it's so boring, but I thought, I listened to an interview with Simon Rattle, and he'd said that he always hears music. He always he's constantly hearing Brahms and Chopin and Goretzky and everything, and he realised in his early 20s that wasn't normal, that he was, and I thought, I'm going to have an earwig in my ear and I'm always going to be hearing music. And I thought, it's going to be Mahler that I'll be listening to, when I'm in dialogue with Petra or whoever, and I'll pick different pieces of music. And in the end, the stuff that I listened to mostly, in most of the scenes, was throat singing and Tibetan chants, because I felt like on some deep way that the character was being drawn into, to becoming the architect of her own demise. She was being drawn into her own destruction, because the thing is, it's about creativity. And as we talk about giving birth to stuff, but we also have to kill things. Creativity is brutal. And in order to achieve something great, you do have to have a sense of deep rigour and brutality with yourself. And in today's world, thank God, we are grappling with the idea of how can you be that rigorous? How can you be that brutal? How can you demand excellence? Because sometimes in the rehearsal room, you do have to say, that is not good enough. What you are frightened right now, and you've got to set yourself aside. I was speaking to this extraordinary concert pianist yesterday, and she was talking about nerves, and her mother, who was her piano teacher, had said, that's selfish. That means you're thinking about yourself, think about the music. And that was said to me at drama school, when I was going, wailing, I can't learn this piece of choreography. And the teacher said, shut up, it's not about you. And now, if you said that in a rehearsal room, you'd be,
I feel back in the Juilliard, one of my favourite scenes.
Well, it was the film
is that
Todd wrote.
Yeah, that Juilliard scene. Yeah.
But what I suppose where I was trying to get to, and I do talk too much, is that how I think it's a really important thing to grapple with. How can we strive for excellence with the same degree of rigour and demand that excellence takes, but do it respectfully? And they're not mutually exclusive, but we are grappling with those things, not just in the creative process in rehearsal rooms. We're grappling with this with one another in the workplace. I mean, this could just as easily have taken place in an architecture firm, or she could have been the CEO of a major banking corporation. It's about the way we deal with each other, and also the way we deal with our stuff.
Yeah. But to sort of follow on from that, and it's a question that you and I discussed before, and Michelle from the audience is raising it as well.
Michelle?
Hello, Michelle. Thank you. Well, Michelle's asking, do you agree with Lydia that art can be enjoyed separately from the artist? And that's sort of a really interesting, I think, question that the whole Juilliard scene raises, and that conversation is, you know, can we, like, if we don't love the artist, can we still love the art?
Well, it's like, I think I always want to be, was Agatha Christie said, you know, one of the great joys of life is being part of something that one doesn't in the least understand. And I think that that's a great joy for me as an actor, is grappling with characters who say and do and experience things that I have no idea where they're coming from. And it's an empathetic experience to try and place yourself, literally, it's a cliche, but in their shoes, do you know? And I think that, you know, I try to do that as a human being. I'm as impatient and judgmental and as intolerant as the next person, but I think that we all have to be heard, but sometimes we need to know, myself included, when to be quiet, like when to listen. And it's really interesting, in a film about music, that there's very little music in there. There's a lot of silence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can we talk? Doug has a question.
I have a pug called Doug.
Doug would like you to explain a little bit more about your contributions to the film behind the scenes, from EPing and co-writing some of the music. And of course, you have your own production company, Dirty Films. You're doing a lot of producing of stories yourself. So how is it wearing that hat as both an actor and as a producer on a film?
What I've really noticed in the advent of the streamers, and the streamers have been a godsend in a lot of ways and provided an incredible amount of opportunities, and so I'm not dismissing them entirely, is that there's not a lot of people who know how to develop work. And I think that you're seeing a lot of people coming from not necessarily just from the pure financial side at producing films, because they know how film is put together. They know where you can save money, and where saving money in the short term is actually a creative and financial disaster. And I think the people who have been making films for a long time have been making them for a long time because their instincts are pretty well honed. And I think I see a lot of actors and directors and writers and musicians becoming producers, and I think it's because their instincts are good. They know instinctually how to put things together, and they know how to communicate. So this is the thing; it doesn't just end with the making of. It's also being involved in something like this, and how. And this is why I felt very passionate about it. And maybe it came out of my experience of working with the Sydney Theatre Company. Is that it's how you start the conversation with an audience, you know. And so we really thought we didn't have to fight that hard because Focus were very much on board, but we thought we don't want to tell people what this movie is. We don't want to put out a 3-act trailer, you know, because that invites really reductive analysis. You all see images, I guess, you know, before you come here, or you've heard about it. I know I go to the cinema or read a book or pick up an album because I've heard about it. You know, it's not necessarily because I've been told what it is. And so how do you, with something as complicated as this, draw as many people in as is possible, but do so in a way that is not closed-ended, but open-ended.
And on that point, though, with the rise of streaming and the big change in how we're all experiencing stories and storytelling in movies, as an actor and as a producer, how do you want people to experience your films? Because this film, to me, what a gift to be able to experience this film in a cinema with the sound. But what do you want to see in terms of how people experience your work?
My work, how we experience not necessarily my work, but just cinema generally. I mean, I've had the great good fortune to go to a lot of different festivals, and the Sydney Festival being one of them. And they're so important because I think you curate these things. It's a bit like creating an album. is that you juxtapose one filmmaker against another filmmaker and films of various different scale and ambition, and that you might go into a festival to see one movie, but you'll come out seeing 3 other ones that you hadn't even conceived of. Whereas if you sit at home with your own algorithm soup, when you see this, you'll like that, and you go, no, I won't. I've seen it already. I find that less interesting, and I'd much rather. I think that there is an effort, and thank you for making the effort of coming out. If you make an effort, you're already leaning into the experience. You're already realizing you're part of the experience, and I think you can feel somehow that you're invisible as a film-going audience, but you're not. And I think you are. I think you feel that when you're in a cinema that's relatively full.
We've got time for just one more. Sorry, because we're going to have to wrap up. But
I've got to get back to Adelaide.
You do have. Well, you're getting back to Adelaide because you are currently shooting a new Australian film with the fabulous Warwick Thornton, produced by the fabulous Kath Shelper, who are friends of and I've read this script, and it's an amazing script, a film called The New Boy. What was it about The New Boy that brought you back here?
Well, Andrew and I got talking with Warwick over the pandemic, and he said, "What have you got in your bottom drawer?" And he said, "Well, I wrote this thing ages ago, and I don't know, it's about a priest." And I went, "Well, I can't play it well. I suppose I could play it for a priest. Well, I'd give it a go." And we got George, and he said, "Well, it was a nun." And anyway, it was a beautiful, beautiful examination of the kind of the intersection and divergence of Western and Indigenous spirituality. And so it's something that Warwick's been thinking about for a really long time, and the kids that I'm working with they're flung out of space, they're extraordinary.
Yeah. Oh, well, having read the script, I cannot wait to see that film when it arrives. Just one more quick question from the audience. Sorry, I've done a bad job, my audience friends, of getting all the questions asked. But I guess a lot of them actually reflected a bit of the questions that I had as well. But one question from Jasmine was about how involved are you in the design of the sets for the film? Because not just sort of the whole production design, and because the look of this film was just incredible. Do you get involved in that at all?
Well, the thing is, it's a bit like when you go to the theatre and you see an empty space, you start reading meaning into the frame before any actor has said a single word, before the lights have gone up. You start reading meaning, and the same is with an empty frame that you know is the character's house. So what that house looks like is part of the character. So yeah, Marco, the production designer, was fantastic, and the art department was really great, and so it's always a collaboration. You think, I'm not sure about that colour, or can we have an object like this? And then you talk to Todd about, once you see the space, you think, this is really interesting. Maybe we're playing the scene over here, but what if we had that in the background? Because then I don't have to act that bit, because the set does it. It always is a collaboration.
Fabulous. Well, look, I could sit here and talk all night, and I'm sure the audience could too, but you have a plane to catch to get back to Adelaide. It's been an absolute delight having you here. Thank you so much for your time.
Greetings once again, guys. Just got out of seeing the brand new film courtesy of Focus Features and Universal Pictures, and that is Tar. It's directed by Todd Field and is starring the wonderful Cate Blanchett. Also, a very notable mention to Nina Hoss. As far as the film goes, quite intriguing, quite interesting. First off the bat, I have to say, quite long. It's essentially an intricate, very detailed character study that nearly feels like a biopic at times, but it's actually not. It's actually a fictional character, but quite a compelling one. Basically, it follows the story of a very prominent female composer who's kind of risen to the top of the food chain, and it's about her kind of really having challenges in her life post kind of pandemic, and really how her personal life and career kind of unravel. It's quite interesting and a really fascinating character study, and really I think considering how much runtime there is and how much detail they have to go through in this script, they do a fabulous job in maintaining the audience's attention. I do have to say the finale of the film probably does kind of lose a bit of traction towards the end. It kind of becomes a little bit satire as opposed to that constant dramatic picture that the rest of the film is, and it is really compelling. A lot of credit has to go to the musical composition and score, and there's a lot of haunting silent moments that kind of accompany and give that contrast to a film that's essentially about musical composition and the creative kind of energy that goes into something like that. Really, the picture kind of follows Cate Blanchett primarily, and she is stunning in that. She is fabulous. She has this commanding presence that really is such a strong focal point for this film, and really she's the one that kind of really holds it together. There are some interesting kind of additions that are kind of noteworthy cameos. Mark Strong is a notable one, but really it is all about Cate Blanchett in this, and I think it's a really kind of interesting and intriguing film. I'd have to say that she's definitely going to get nominated for an Oscar for this picture, and if she's not the front runner to kind of get Best Actress, I don't know who's going to be competing against her, but it's really a fantastic kind of character study, and I have to give a lot of credit to the team who constructed this wonderful kind of picture. But as I said, a little bit long, it can kind of lose a bit of traction in the middle and towards the end, but really cinematography in this and the great way the kind of narrative unfolds and the script, some of that dialogue, it's kind of worth rewatching multiple times. It's quite sharp, it's quite witty, and delivered in such a kind of really succinct and brutal way. I think it's really cool the way that kind of script develops throughout the picture. But yeah, that final act, I probably find it a little bit kind of unsatisfying, but really it is kind of a deconstruction of a character as opposed to kind of their climb up the ladder. It's kind of interesting in that way. So I guess don't expect happy endings in this, but it's very intriguing and definitely masterful work. Definitely catch it while you can in cinemas. Aside from that, I'm about to head off. I hope you enjoy the footage from tonight, and I'll catch you guys at the next one.